Popularity is not synonymous with quality. If it was, we could pretty easily say that McDonald's is the best food on the planet, Taylor Swift makes the best music, and that the iPhone something Pro Max is the best phone. But of course, we know that all three of those things is completely wrong, right? I think we can all agree on those three simple facts. Yet still, it does matter in some other ways how popular a thing is. Today we're talking about folding phones, their popularity, how well they are selling specifically in the European region. We're looking at an article here on shanecraig.tech, but the information in this graph in particular is taken from this post over on Counterpoint Research, which for some reason does not want to load on my browser. If we look at this graph, we are looking at foldable smartphone sales by OEM share Q1 of 2025, which has just happened, versus Q1 of 2024, so a year-over-year change. And man, are there some notable shifts year over year. So let's start with the biggest one, okay? So Samsung, Q1 of 2024, European folding phone sales, they had 56% of the market. But 1 year later, that has dropped to 41%. They're down 24% according to this. Perhaps this is what happens when you continue to release folding phones with very, very small, very iterative changes in the face of increasingly steep, increasingly potent competition. You will start to see some of that market share dominance be pulled out of your hands. Let's look at Motorola next. They went from 10% market share to 15%, growing their share fairly significantly there on the backs of their more affordable Razr flip phone style devices. I think that that's really, really impressive from Motorola. What about Oppo? They've actually dropped by 63%. And this is really interesting to me because they didn't release in 2024 a book-style folding phone. Now that I'm thinking about it, they didn't release a flip-style phone either, yet they had 12% market share. But they have now released the Oppo Find N5, which is a fantastic phone. And despite that coming out in February, they have seen their market share plummet from 12% down to 4%, again, in Europe. I don't know exactly what this means for Oppo, but it's definitely not a good sign. But you know who has recently had some really good signs? Well, that's going to be Google. Look at their little green bar here. It was 2% market share. Clearly, the original Pixel Fold was not making a lot of headway in Europe, but the Pixel 9 Pro Fold apparently has. They have quadrupled their market share up to 8%. Tecno has done the same thing from 2% to 8%. Now, the difference here is that Tecno makes affordable folding phones. The Pixel 9 Pro Fold is not an affordable folding phone. None of them are really affordable, but you know what I mean. Tecno makes much cheaper, more budget-focused folding phones. The Pixel 9 Pro Fold is an $1,800 phone, so that is a difference there. I also need somebody that's like more attuned to this kind of analytical data to tell me how Tecno and Google both went from 2% to 8%, but their actual percentage over here, plus 265, plus 336. Why would they be different percentages? Wouldn't they be the same? I'm a little bit confused by that. The article does not really make that clear to me, so maybe some of you that are more familiar with this stuff can explain to me how that makes any sense. As a whole, the folding phone market grew by 4%, which is not a whole heck of a lot, but there have been some expectations that 2025 would see the folding phone market be very close to flat, if not in a decline, as everyone is kind of waiting for Apple to make their move with an iPhone Fold. And then, of course, we're going to be getting Samsung Z Fold 7 coming, honestly, probably next month. Maybe that will make a little bit of a difference. But there have been projections of moderate to negative growth, or shrinkage, if you want to call it that, from this market. Now, typically, you wouldn't look at 4% growth as a great sign. It's fairly low, but considering the same research firm said that globally we should expect a 4% loss in the folding phone market, the fact that we're actually up 4%, I think, again, in Europe, I think is actually a pretty good sign. And of course, the Z Fold 7, like I just alluded to, is coming relatively soon, and I actually think there's a chance it's going to outsell the Z Fold 6 and buck the trend where each subsequent Z Fold is selling worse than the prior model. I think going back to the Fold 3, somehow each subsequent model has sold worse than the prior. So hopefully the Galaxy Z Fold 7 can buck that trend because, look, even though Samsung's market share is slipping, they are still 41% of Europe's market share in foldables. They are still the dominant force. Even if it's slipping, it matters what they do. But I think it's also really important to give Google their flowers here. Time and time again, I talk about Pixel phones, and the people that watch my videos, a lot of the time, they talk about that Tensor chip. They talk about how it doesn't have that flagship processor, and yet the Pixel 8, the Pixel 9, they all are selling better and better year over year. And now we see it in the folding phone world as well, where the 9 Pro Fold, which abandoned the form factor that I preferred of the original, has outsold the original Pixel Fold. I think it had to have outsold it because they have quadrupled their market share in Europe. I would love to see global data or North American data on this as well, but for now, that is our best peek into exactly what Google is managing to do with the Pixel 9 Pro Fold. Now, with the Pixel 10 Pro Fold, things do look to be very, very much the same. The hardware is barely changing, other than internally going from the Tensor G4 to the Tensor G5. The camera hardware, no major changes there to speak of. So can they maintain that kind of growth with the 10 Pro Fold? What kind of software features, longevity, battery life, efficiency, what can they bring with this device to continue that kind of growth? I mean, heaven forbid they repeat that kind of growth again. They could be suddenly competing with Samsung in a way that I don't think anybody could have possibly predicted. As always, I would love to hear your guys' thoughts on this in the comments down below. Thanks for watching. To see more content just like this, hit that subscribe button before you go. And until next time, stay nerdy, my friends.